Welcome everyone to this live training on how to teach abroad in 2025. I'm Jamie from ESL Teacher 365, and today we'll go through a training that will help you understand a lot of the basics around teaching abroad, plus some of the latest trends and topics for teaching in 2025. Whether you're a new teacher or maybe you are looking to move to another country, this training is for you. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment as I'm going through the training. And also, if you are catching up on the replay, you can leave your comments. I will be answering questions live at the end. And then if you are watching this replay, I do go in the comments and answer those questions as well. So any questions that you have, please leave them for me. And to get started, I would love to know where you are watching from today and your teaching experience. Are you a brand new teacher? Do you have some teaching experience in your home country? Have you taught abroad before? Just to give me a better idea of who is tuning into these live videos or catching up on the replay. If you haven't heard my story before, I'm going to share a little bit about my own teach abroad journey just to give you an idea of what is possible and to help inspire you on your own journey. So on the left is a picture from my first place that I taught abroad. This was in Costa Rica, and it was a community center where I taught English as well as dance. So if you look through the window, you will see that that's a dance studio as well. I had adult students, I also had kids, and the dance classes were all for kids. So that's how I started my Teach Abroad journey. That was in 2007. In the middle picture, this is one of my classrooms in Spain. I taught in Spain for 5 years, and this was at an international school. I will be talking a little bit about international schools today. Those aren't typically TEFL jobs. You're not teaching English as a foreign language, but they're a fantastic opportunity if you are a certified teacher. So that is my first grade classroom in Madrid, Spain. And then on the right, this is a group of adult students in Australia. And I know people don't typically think about being able to teach English in an English-speaking country, but it is possible. And I will also be sharing how you can do that. So this was a general English class, but I also did Cambridge test prep there. And I am currently still in Australia, but I am working 100% online right now. So some stats of my Teach Abroad journey. I have taught and lived in 6 different countries. I've been teaching abroad and online from abroad for about 15 years. And I counted up everything, all the schools, different programs I've done. I've done English immersion summer camps as well, and those are 17. So a lot of different ways to teach abroad. And I will be sharing all the different ways that you can teach abroad in this training. So stay tuned for that. Just to give you a little bit of inspiration, I started teaching abroad without a bachelor's degree. I know that's a lot of people that want to teach abroad and they don't have a degree yet, or they just never got one and they're wondering, is it possible? Yes, it is possible to teach without a degree. I now have a teaching license, I have a SALTA, and I have a master's in education. So I actually got all of those things during my teaching journey. So I just kind of kept collecting different qualifications as I went through my Teach Abroad journey. So that is possible too. You can kind of keep leveling up as you go. I found all of my Teach Abroad jobs on my own. I have never personally used a recruiter. There are countries where recruiters are more common, but I did a lot of research on my own. I've always found my own jobs, and now I help people find jobs on their own as well. And I've been able to visit 22 countries while teaching abroad on a teacher's salary. So there's a lot of ways where you can travel while you're teaching abroad or between contracts, during your paid holidays, things like that. So if you like to travel, this is a really good way to do that. Okay. I just want to give you a little bit of inspiration before we dive into all of the more how-to practical information. Teaching English abroad can be intimidating and overwhelming. I'm not going to lie. I was terrified the first time I taught abroad and a little bit the second time too. But with the right planning and mindset, you can do it. It really comes down to your planning, how prepared you are, and your mindset of being flexible and open and willing to try new things. So if you are open to planning and having good mindset, then you will be absolutely fine. So let's begin with some teach abroad qualifications. What do you even need if you want to teach abroad? So each country has completely different requirements. I wish it was just as simple as telling you it's this, this, and this, but it really depends on the way you're teaching, where you're teaching, what type of school it is, all of that information. And so careful research is important so your visa isn't denied. I have spent many, many hours researching when I was looking for teach abroad jobs and just looking over all the visa requirements. So it does take some work. And if you need help, there are people like me that can help you with that. So the general requirements, speaking in general, you'll need to have an accredited TEFL certificate. So this means that it's at least 120 hours from an accredited company. There are like a million different TEFL certificates out there. So I will recommend some that I have personally tested and I know are accredited. Most countries also require a bachelor's degree in any subject. Can you teach without a degree? Yes, you can, but you're going to be a lot more limited in where you can teach. So as long as you understand that, that's fine. You will also need a valid passport. Check to see if your passport is going to expire while you plan on being abroad. If it is, you need to renew it now so that's valid for the entire time that you plan on teaching abroad. And a lot of these visas and schools will ask for a clean background check. So that means that you have no criminal history, and they may ask for a health check as well. I've had to do that for Spain, Australia. I didn't have to do it for France. I didn't have to do it for Costa Rica. Egypt, I think I had to do it as well. So it really depends on the country and the program that you're going through. So a little bit about TEFL certificates specifically in 2025. Cheap courses are not accredited for teaching abroad. If your course is $30, $50, $70, it's likely not accredited for teaching abroad. You can use it for teaching online, but when you go to apply for your visa, they may be very strict and you have to get it certified and stamped, and they may say this is not legit, we can't accept this. So don't fall for that. If you want to teach abroad, invest in a quality TEFL certificate. It has to be 120 hours as a minimum, like I mentioned before. Some companies offer courses that are like 80 hours. I don't understand why, because that's not going to help you teach online or abroad. You need at least 120 hours. And specifically in 2025, more schools are looking for TEFL certificates that include teaching practice. So CELTA always includes teaching practice. It is technically 6 observed teaching hours, and then you complete some student observations as well. You're watching some videos and also your tutors teaching, and so that ends up being about 20 hours of teaching practice. So there are courses like International TEFL Academy, which include a practicum, and a lot of the smaller companies are also offering that as well. So I would definitely try and get a course with a teaching practicum or teaching practice add-on if possible. Job assistance. I get a lot of questions about TEFLs with job assistance, and it really varies from company to company. So the best job assistance I've seen is with International TEFL Academy. You do get to work with an advisor. They have some guides on the different countries. They have some alumni groups and a lot of connections with different jobs in different countries. For the more affordable courses, they are typically just giving you a list of links. And sometimes those links are really old and they don't work, or they're just not good jobs. So do be careful. If you're needing help with job assistance, you need to think about if that's important to you or not. And of course, I also help people find jobs. If you are a new teacher, you don't have a degree, or you're a non-native speaker, I recommend a level 5 course over a level 3. So level 3 is that basic 120-hour TEFL certificate. Level 5s, you'll see random hours like 180 hours, 168 hours, but it's basically just more in depth. So I've tested out courses that are level 3 and level 5. Very similar information, but the level 5 tends to go in more depth. So if you are new or you're looking for a better qualification, then go for those level 5s. And things like CELTA, Cert TESOL, International TEFL Academy, those are all level 5s. So those aren't level 3s at all. So what are some of the best courses? The gold standard is probably CELTA. Cert TESOL is very similar, but do understand that CELTA is specifically for teaching adults. So if you want to teach kids, or you're not sure if you want to teach adults or kids, CELTA might not be the best option. It's also the most expensive. So I did my CELTA here in Australia, in Brisbane. I did the 11-week in-person course, and it's a lot of work. You have a lot of assignments. You're doing a ton of lesson planning, teaching real students. You have observation hours. We had to go in on Saturdays and do lessons. So it is a lot. And the difference between CELTA and Cert TESOL is that CELTA is more widely offered and Cert TESOL is just not as widely offered, but it is very, very similar. So if you want to do a CELTA or Cert TESOL course, you need to find a center near you that offers this course. So just do a Google search, see where these courses are offered. And these are standardized courses. So it's not like going to be super, super different depending on where you take it. If you're looking for a course that's online, or you want to do your course abroad, then I do recommend International TEFL Academy. They also offer that teaching practicum and job search assistance. So with CELTA, I got 0 job search assistance. They basically said, thanks for paying whatever it was, like $3,000 for your course, goodbye. And International TEFL Academy, you get lifetime job search assistance. So if you want to learn more about International TEFL Academy, I do have a discount code with them. So you will fill out this form and then you'll get that discount code. So it's just eslteacher365.com/ITA-TEFL. If you're looking at more affordable courses, maybe you're not sure if you want to teach abroad full time, you already have some teaching experience, or you want to go to a country that's not as competitive, then 2 courses that I have taken and recommend are the TEFL Academy and Premier TEFL. And I do have discount codes with those as well. So you get an extra 10% off of each course. So you can jot down these discount codes if you like, and you'll just go to those websites. Okay, and I do have videos on all of these courses on my channel that let you see what the course is like. I talk about the pros and cons as well. So if you are curious about any of these, after this video, you can always check out those reviews. Courses I do not recommend. Teacher Record is a free course, which if you want to just get an idea of what the TEFL industry is like, you can take it, but it's not accredited for teaching abroad. Udemy, those courses are not accredited. International Open Academy, again, is okay for online teaching, not for teaching abroad. World TESOL Academy is like $30, not accredited for teaching abroad. I've heard a lot of bad things recently about I2I, about people not getting their certificates, a lot of issues. I think they went bankrupt recently. So stay away from I2I. And anything on Groupon is not going to be accredited either. So if you have one of these, you need to get a real accredited TEFL course if you want to teach abroad. For the degree, most countries are going to require a degree that's a bachelor's degree as a visa requirement. If you want to teach somewhere without a degree, you're going to be looking at places like Cambodia, some of Eastern Europe, some parts of Latin America. and some parts of the Middle East as well, like Jordan and Egypt. It can be in any subject unless you are a non-native speaker. So for some countries, for non-native speakers, that's anyone that's not from a country where English is the official spoken language. You may be asked to have a degree in education, in English, something more specific. So again, each country has its own requirements. You need to look at the exact visa you're applying for, program you're applying for, all of that. You also will need to have an official copy of your degree and your transcripts. So when I needed this, I just contacted my university and I actually got like, I don't know, 5 or 6 copies of my degree and of my transcripts at the same time, because as I've taught abroad, I've moved from country to country. So it's an easier just kind of having all those documents ready, and then I can use them for my next job. So contact your university and make sure that you have the official copies. International schools. So I mentioned this at the start. I did teach in an international school, and this is basically a K-12 school where English is the medium of instruction. So most of these students are maybe from other countries. They could be diplomats' kids, could be a mix of local students and international kids. But the idea is that they are going to an American or British style school, but in their country. So you're not typically going to get to work there if you have a TEFL certificate. They're looking for a degree in education and or a teaching license. So I personally have a US teaching license, and I was able to teach in this school in Madrid. So if you're interested in working in international schools, then you can get a US teaching license. And to see if you are eligible, you can go to eslteacher365.com/Moreland. And this is a program that offers a fast-tracked US teaching license. So it is a good option if you're looking to add that on to your TEFL, and that opens up like a whole nother world of schools where you can teach abroad. But again, these jobs are K through 12. So if you're wanting to teach adults, probably not the best option. Let's look at how to choose where to teach. So we will go region by region, kind of looking at the differences to give you an idea of maybe where you would like to teach. Let's start with Europe. So most of Western Europe is going to require a bachelor's degree, and then there are countries in Eastern Europe where they won't require a degree. However, with the EU, the issue is that work visas are difficult to get. They have to offer the job to EU citizens and residents first, and then they can offer it to foreign teachers. But you basically have to prove that you are able to do the job over any EU citizen. So to give you an example of this, at my American school in Madrid, they opened up the job, but they specifically said, we're looking for teachers with US teaching licenses or British teaching licenses. Obviously, not many Europeans are naturally going to have that. So once they open that up, then they could hire me as kind of a skilled work visa situation. So they were able to sponsor my visa. So that's kind of why you'll find that a lot of the positions will require something like a student visa with working rights, or maybe you'll need a freelancer visa, a business visa. It's just because work visas are very tricky to get. For example, in Italy, you can study Italian, and then you can get, I believe it's 20 hours of working rights, and then you can use your TEFL to teach in private language academies in Italy. So there are different options. You'll just have to look at the countries that you're interested in and see what's available and what types of visas that they have. So for Europe, you will tend to break even. You do have a really good work-life balance. You're not teaching as many hours as you would in places like the Middle East and Asia, but obviously you're not making as much money because you're not teaching as many hours. So it's a great place, and it's a good way to be able to live in Europe, but long-term it can be a bit tricky just because you're not saving as much money. But if you're young, I did all my teaching in France and Spain when I was in my 20s, early 20s. So it can be a really nice option. Some programs that are available to teach in Europe, you have a ton of them in Spain. You have the Auxiliares de Conversación. They accept different countries like the Philippines, India, Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. You also have private ones called Beta, USETAM. If you want to teach with some support with your visa, things like that, you have companies like RVF International, CIEE, and Conversa Spain. And if you just graduated, Medeas is an option for you. For France, there's a program called TAPIF. For Poland, you have English Wizards. Georgia is the Teach in Georgia program. And there's also Fulbright English Teaching Assistance, and that's for all countries. You can apply for that. So each program is going to have different requirements. A lot of these only accept Americans, for example, but see if you're eligible. Go to the official websites for these programs to see if you qualify. Now let's look at Asia. For Asia, most of the countries are going to require a bachelor's degree. Cambodia does not. So that's probably your best option if you don't have a degree and you want to teach in Asia. Some countries have more jobs for teaching kids. So Vietnam, for example, it's a lot easier to teach kids than it is to teach adults. Benefits and recruiters are common. So you might find that they offer free accommodation or flights or paid holidays, things like that. And a lot of these countries also hire through recruiting. There are different websites that you can use to find these positions. In Asia, as compared to Europe, the working hours are a lot longer. And it depends on, are you teaching in public schools or private schools? The private schools, you might be teaching after school hours and weekends, and then public schools would be that normal kind of Monday through Friday teaching job. Some countries like South Korea and China only accept native English speakers if you want to teach ESL. So if you want to teach something like math and you're a certified teacher, then it's possible to teach in a place like China. But if you are from India, for example, you want to teach in China ESL, unfortunately, they will not be able to give you a visa to teach ESL there. There are some programs for these countries. There is EPIC in South Korea. There's the JET program in Japan, and I also work with a recruiter called Interact. For China, there's a recruiter I work with called Talent E, and for Vietnam, Ninja Teacher. So if you're interested in these places and you would like to get some help connecting with some of these recruiters or programs, you can just send me an email at jamie@eslteacher365.com. Let me know, okay, I want to teach in Japan, for example, and I can email you the information. Latin America. So my first place I taught was Costa Rica in Latin America. And some countries don't require a degree, and they also don't have age restrictions. So a place like Asia has a lot of age restrictions. They typically don't hire anyone over maybe 50, 55, depending on the country. But in a place like Mexico, there are absolutely no age restrictions. So you can teach there, no matter your age. There are jobs for all ages. There's also a lot of business English jobs. So if you have a background in business or you're interested in teaching business English, this could be a good option. I did an interview with an Australian teacher who taught, I believe it was at Adidas in Colombia. So she did business English lessons right at the company. You tend to break even in Latin America as well. So for Asia, that's a good place to save. Europe, you're breaking even. Latin America, you're breaking even. This is because there's low pay, but there's also a low cost of living. So just consider that. The thing that's a little bit tricky about Latin America is that these jobs aren't really posted online and they're not really using recruiters. So you will have to travel to the country on a tourist visa and then interview in person and then change your status once you have a signed contract. So of course, look into each specific country to see how the process works. but in a lot of Latin America, that is how it works. So you need to know when the hiring seasons are and have all of your documents already prepared so that you can start processing that work permit or work visa when you arrive in the country. For Africa, teaching abroad just is not as common as the other regions. And a lot of the jobs here are only volunteer. So I believe it will start growing in the future, but right now there aren't many options. International schools, and private tutoring are the best options. So if you are a certified teacher, there are 100% international schools in Africa, but if you aren't a certified teacher, you might only be able to work in private schools with your TEFL certificate, and a degree may be required too. For Northern Africa, these are actually usually considered Middle Eastern jobs. So if you teach in a place like Morocco or Egypt, those are usually considered more Middle East instead of Africa. For the Middle East, you do have some really competitive countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, and these are looking for experienced teachers, so at least 2 years of teaching experience, and a lot of them prefer a master's degree. So that's a little bit different than some of the regions that we've seen. If you don't have a degree, you don't have experience, then you can look at places like Jordan and Egypt. The salaries are a lot less, but again, they're not as competitive. There's not as many requirements. And some jobs, depending on the country, are only going to hire male teachers, and that is just for cultural reasons. So do be aware of that. Another option would be English-speaking countries. So I'm American, and I came here to Australia in 2016 to teach English, which is, I don't know, people always find that very weird. They're like, why would you teach English in an English-speaking country? Well, I'm not teaching the locals. I am teaching the international students and the immigrants, for example. So the only thing to know about this is that most of these countries are not going to sponsor any sort of visa for ESL teachers. So you either need to be a certified teacher and get a skilled visa, or you need to come with your working rights ready to go. So that's what I did here. I got a work holiday visa. So that allows me to work at any sort of job for 6 months, and then I have to change to another job after 6 months. So that's what I did. I worked at one school for 6 months, and then I worked at another school for 6 months. So they were able to hire me because I already had working rights in the country. So again, you're going to be working typically with international students or immigrants. So this is a very important slide, so I'll make it bigger, but it is about all of the different ways to teach abroad. And I think that a lot of people don't know that there are so many ways to teach. They just think, oh, I can teach in like public or private schools. Nope. There are many, many options. So I will go through all of these different ways, and you can kind of jot down the ones that are interesting to you. So we have private language schools and academies. This is going to be a good option if you want to teach adults. Sometimes these classes are also for kids outside of regular school hours, so extra classes for them to improve their English skills. Public schools, a lot of the public schools are going to be connected with Teach Abroad programs, but not always. It depends on the school and on the country. For charter schools, this is when some of the money comes from the parents and some comes from the government. I worked at a charter school in Spain, and this was through a program. So some programs will connect you with charter schools instead of public or private schools. Summer camps. There are a lot of different English immersion summer camps abroad that you can apply to. And I taught at one in Spain and 2 different ones in France. TEFL courses. This is kind of weird, but if you don't have your TEFL yet, you can do your TEFL course, and then a lot of them will give you a year-long student visa, and then you can teach during that year in that country. So say you want to go to Spain, you do your TEFL course the first 4 weeks, and then they usually help you find work, and you have a student visa because you're studying Spanish during that whole year. So that is another option. Language assistant programs. These are some that I mentioned before, but basically you are working in local schools with a local teacher and you are helping out. Typically, these are K-12 schools. Sometimes you will have more community college level students. International schools, these are the K-12 schools that require a teaching license, and these recruit with agencies. So you'll find search associates, international school services, TES, Teach Away. Those are agencies that can place you in international schools. If you're interested in business English, then you can look for in-company business classes. This means that you're traveling from business to business and you are teaching, could be small groups, could be a large group. It really depends on what they hire you for. There's also freelance tutoring. Some different countries will allow you to get a freelance visa and you can live and work there and just be a freelance tutor. So you could be doing business English classes or just private tutoring. There's also online teaching abroad. You could be a digital nomad, community centers like my first job in Costa Rica, teaching fellowships like the Fulbright. You could be an au pair abroad. You can look into work holiday visas. And if you are qualified, you can teach in universities and community colleges abroad. So I would love to know which region or regions would you like to teach in and which ways of teaching abroad are you interested in? So leave me a comment. Let me know whether you're watching live or you are catching up on the replay. I'll pause here for just a minute and get an idea. Okay, let's keep going. These next few parts, I'm going to share a bunch of tips to help you with the whole process, and then we'll finish with a little bit of confidence boosting too. So let's look at the application, visa, and some document tips. So for applications, if you're applying to a Teach Abroad program, those typically open 1 or 2 times a year. So that means if you miss that deadline of when it's open, you have to wait a whole nother year for applications to open. And my tip is that you really want to apply as soon as these applications open because there is more and more demand each year. So for example, I believe the program for France, TAPIF, they are open right now and they are closing in February. So you need to make sure to get all of your documents, everything ready, and have it all turned in before that deadline. For private language schools, many of these do hire year-round. And I worked at a private language school in Australia, and we had new students every single week. So we had rolling admission, and we also needed a different amount of teachers because if we had more students, we needed more teachers. So they're constantly hiring people. Teachers were constantly leaving to then go teach in Thailand or Indonesia, different places, and then they would come back. So we just kind of had this constant hiring going on in our school. And you can apply through a recruiter or directly to the schools. Depends on the country, depends where you are teaching. So sometimes you have these options of both. Sometimes you'll only have one option. have your updated CV or resume ready and in the form of the country. So this means that if the resume in the country where you're applying includes a photo, include your photo. I know that for the US, like we don't normally include a photo. That can be kind of strange. So you need to get an idea of what is typically on those resumes. A lot of them will also ask for your marital status, your age, your visa status, your residency status, things like that, which may be not normal in your country. So do some research and see what is included on those CVs. I do suggest to help you stand out, especially in 2025, where everything is really easy to make on your phone. Film an intro video, film a demo video of a sample class, and have a teacher website. So this is really easy to include on your LinkedIn or add a link on your CV or resume. It's just another way for the schools to get an idea of your personality, your accent, what you are like in the classroom, and helps you stand out because there are a lot of candidates these days. And apply to many jobs in different countries. You don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket and only apply, to one country or to one type of job. Try to do many, many different applications, and then that way you know that you will have success. For the visa, the timeline and length can be very different. For my Spain visa, I applied in, I believe back then we could apply in like November or December. I didn't get my placement until the summer, and then I had to start my visa application. I think we started around spring or summer and then finally got it granted. And I picked up my visa and I left for Spain that same day, which was probably extremely stressful. I don't recommend doing that, but very long visa process for Spain. Whereas for Australia, I just went on the website, applied for the work holiday visa. It was instant for my husband because he applied through Italy. But for the United States, it was a little bit different. I had to do a chest x-ray. And then after that, it took about a week. So I had my visa in 1 week, which was very, very fast. So it depends on the type of visa and the job you're applying for. You may need to apply from your home country. So I applied to teach in Spain while I was living in Egypt. So I could do some of the process abroad, and my mom was able to help me with some of the documentation, but I did have to go and travel back to the US, get my visa in person at the embassy for Spain, and then fly to Spain. So do be aware of that if you're changing countries or you're planning on doing some traveling. And you may also have additional paperwork for your residency to complete upon arrival. So this just means that your visa may grant you entry into the country, but it's only once you do your residency paperwork that you can actually stay in that country for the whole year or whatever the length of your contract is. For visas, know who pays the fee. Are you supposed to pay for the visa? Does your school pay for that? And have that included in your contract so it's very clear who is paying for what. Also know that you may be without your passport while it's processing. So for Spain, I had to go in person, drop off my application, drop off my passport, and then it was several weeks. And then I had to go again and pick it up in person. So you can't be traveling, obviously, while your visa is processing. I've heard people who have accidentally, done that. Oops, I booked a trip, but I don't have my passport. So just be careful. And these visas change constantly. There are new digital nomad visas. There's things that are changing. So always check with the official embassy or consulate websites. They will have the most up-to-date information on what is available. A lot of the stuff online is super outdated. So you can read it to get an idea, but there may be other options for you that you're not aware of because they're too new and they're not online yet. For your documents, again, like we talked about before, really depends on where you're applying, but you typically need things like the official copy of your degree, your birth certificate, your TEFL, your transcripts. a medical letter. So this may be going to your regular GP. For my Australian visa, I had to go to a specific doctor for this visa, and there was only one in Spain. So luckily I was in Madrid and I could just go there. But if I lived in a different Spanish region or like the Canary Islands, something like that, I would have had to travel to Madrid just to see that doctor for that chest x-ray, because that was the only approved doctor for that visa. Police background check. A lot of these will ask for a police background check for countries that you've lived in for the past 5 or 10 years. So if you've been traveling or teaching abroad for a while, it can be a little bit tricky to be getting all of those background checks. And you'll also need a letter from your employer. This is usually what's going to help you grant that visa, is that you have the letter or the signed contract from your employer. For documents, a pro tip is keep a digital version on your Google Drive. So I've been at different borders and I've had to give them different visa paperwork or show different documents, and it has saved me a lot of hassle by having a folder with all of these different things on my phone. So that way it's just easy to show them. Keep your own medical records. So like I mentioned, I've lived in 6 different countries. So I essentially just keep all of my own medical records now. I always ask the doctor when I'm in that country to give me all of the test results and scans and whatever. And I keep that with me because, you know, it's not standardized between the different countries. You are in charge of all of that stuff. Have your emergency contact info as well. Have information like the embassy for your new country, and give your friends and family back home your contact information, your school address, email, the phone number at your school, the numbers of your roommates if you have any. And also for some of the documents, you may need official stamps. And this just proves that it's an official document. And this process can also take a long time. So it depends on what is required of the visa, but it may take several weeks or months just to get this stamp, and you will need that stamped document to apply for your visa. So none of this is to scare you, but just know that like the visa process is very challenging and annoying, honestly, but it is so worth it once you're abroad, once you've passed through all of that. Okay, part 4, salaries, budget, and benefits. For salaries, it's really hard to give you a figure of what you can earn because it depends on so many different factors. So first of all, how many hours are you working? In Spain, I was teaching 16 hours per week in one of my programs. And then in Australia, I was teaching, I believe it was like 26 hours. In the international school, I was teaching 40 hours. So obviously those are very, very different, and I was receiving different amounts of pay. It also depends on the cost of living. You may be earning less in countries like Vietnam, but if the cost of living is quite low, you could actually be able to save. But same thing on the other end. Maybe you're earning a good salary, but the cost of living is really expensive here in Australia, for example, so you're not saving as much. Just really depends. Look at the benefits that are included in your package. Some will include things like bonuses if you finish the year, free housing. So obviously that's a cost that you don't have. So take a look at that because that also factors into your salary. Your experience. So the more experienced you are, you may get a higher level of pay. In Australia, it's very standardized. And so it depends on how many hours, not how many hours, but how many years you've been teaching, and then also your qualifications. And it's just all a scale. So they basically just, look at the math and this is what you get paid. So I do have a master's in education. So I started out on a higher pay scale than a lot of the other teachers at my school. And also the way that you're teaching abroad. Are you teaching abroad as a digital nomad? Are you doing a language assistant program? Those salaries are going to be very, very different. Highest salaries. If you are looking at making money, saving money, and this being a kind of long-term career, then you can look at places like the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Qatar, those places, China, English-speaking countries. So I think the most I've made was here in Australia. The wages were definitely the highest. South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and then international schools. So teaching in Spain, I made the most in the international school. But technically, per hour, I made more as a teaching assistant. But because I was teaching so many hours at the international school, I made more that way. Some of the costs to teach abroad to help you with your budget. You will need to pay possibly for your application and visa. Again, are you paying for this or is your school? There may be a medical check that you need to pay for. Some of those can be quite expensive, like several $100s. Document certification to get those official stamps, your flight. Sometimes flights are included, sometimes they're not. Travel or travel medical insurance, your hotel while you're looking for housing, a housing deposit, and your first month or two of expenses, and of course your first month of rent as well. Use numbeo.com to check the cost of living. This is a website where you can look at different cities and they'll show you like the average cost of fuel and eggs and milk and things like that. So you can make a little budget for yourself. And if you want to share an apartment, that's a really good way to save money. I did that basically until I got married. I always shared apartments and it was a good way to learn the language because I always lived with locals. But yeah, good money saver. That way I could travel more and save more. And then also see if your visa allows you to hold additional jobs. Not all visas will. Some will say that they're tied to your school and you can only work there, but some will let you do other things. So whether it's you want to coach or teach a class somewhere, yoga, something like that, or you want to work in a bar, you want to teach additional classes, it may be possible. And another tip is to reverse engineer your budget. So take a look at what your salary is, how much you're going to be earning, and then kind of divide it based on your rent and some money for experiences. Divide that however you would like to budget. For benefits, these are more common in the Middle East, Asia, and international schools. So unfortunately, Europe, you're not usually getting much. Latin America, the same. Africa, the same. For English-speaking countries, if you're working in international schools, yes, but otherwise, remember that you kind of need to get your own visa, you need to get your own housing, so you're not getting those benefits. So what benefits would be is things like flights, paid housing, insurance, bonuses, paid holidays. So most teach abroad jobs will include your salary and some sort of health insurance, but that's about it. That's kind of the bare minimum. Don't forget to negotiate your contract. And if you can't negotiate your salary, see if you can at least negotiate some benefits. And you also may need to set up your own retirement savings. So the only place that I've had money put towards my retirement was Australia. Every other country, you're on your own. You have to figure it out yourself. And that can get a little bit tricky. Okay, the last part is the confidence to teach abroad. So just some tips to help you feel more confident as you're teaching abroad. Teaching abroad is a big change. There are a lot of really high highs and really low lows. So the best way is to expect that this is going to happen and prepare for it. So you'll see that when you teach abroad, it's kind of like, you're scared and then everything's really exciting. And then you start to feel homesick and then you feel really comfortable and then you have to leave. So it's a lot of ups and downs. So if you know that this is going to happen, it's going to give you a better experience. You will learn about the world and about yourself. So if you're brave enough to teach abroad, be ready to have a new perspective on the world, a new perspective on yourself, on your goals. It's a big transformation, and I really recommend that everyone try teaching abroad at least 1 year out of their life because it is very, very eye-opening. My biggest tip would be to be flexible. It makes teaching abroad so much easier. So by being flexible, I mean that you're willing to try new things or do things in a different way. And this could be as easy as teaching a lesson in a way that you wouldn't normally do it, or trying out a new activity in your new country, learning some of the language. When you push yourself out of your comfort zone and you are just kind of open and you say yes to everything, you'll have a much better experience. So I've taught abroad and I've obviously met other teachers, and the ones who kind of stayed in their room and they didn't push themselves to get out and about, they really, really struggled. But the people who were trying new things and having all these amazing experiences were the ones that taught abroad for a lot longer. And of course, I'm here to support you. You are not alone. So I've taught abroad many times. I've been through the teach abroad process so many different times, so many different visas, and I can support you through all of this. So if you need help, please reach out and contact me. I've got lots of different ways to support you. So I do have a little special deal for anyone that is watching live, or if you catch up on the replay within the next week. My online course is very similar to the training that we did today, but way more in depth. You also get a lot of PDFs to help you with different things and support as you go through the teach abroad process. It breaks it up into steps to help you go step by step and work towards your goal of teaching abroad. So if you would like to get a 50% discount for the next week only, you can go to eslteacher365.com/roadmap and use the code TEACH2025. So this is a course that I have done live. I offer it with lifetime access. So you can just purchase it once and then you have it for the rest of your life whenever you're ready to teach abroad. Okay, let's get into the Q&A. So if you have any sort of question, please leave it in the comments. I will go through and see if there's anything I can answer from before. And let's see what questions you have. All right, let's see what we got before. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so Jasmine says, I have a master's in education, but not licensed. I'm wondering if I could still teach abroad. We'll look into these certifications. So some schools, as long as you have like a bachelor's or master's in education, then you will qualify to teach in international schools. For TEFL jobs, like teaching English as a foreign language, they will also accept that master's in education, but that might not be the same as, the actual teaching of English as a foreign language. So I'd still recommend getting a TEFL certificate if you're interested in teaching ESL. And it depends on the country. So when I applied to Australia, I had a US teaching license. I had over 7 years of experience, a master's in education, and they still said, you still need a TEFL certificate. So that's why I ended up doing my CELTA course here, because that was a requirement to teach at the language schools. But then, like in Spain and France and Egypt and Costa Rica, I had never needed a TEFL certificate. I was never asked for that. So I wish I had done my TEFL earlier, but I didn't. So it is possible to teach without one, but I don't recommend it, because once I did my TEFL, then I was like, oh, I could have been like helping my students much more, because I learned a lot of different methods and techniques. So it can be very helpful. Okay, Jenny asks, what would it be like teaching in Italy? So if you don't have EU working rights, teaching in Italy can be tricky, not impossible, but can be tricky. And that's just because most of the language schools aren't able to sponsor your work visa. So there are some international schools there if you're a certified teacher, but if you're just wanting to teach ESL, the best option is probably going like the student visa route with working rights. And then if you know Italian, that can be helpful too. I know there are people there teaching without degrees, but a lot of the schools will require one. So A lot of teaching abroad is just kind of digging and digging and digging and trying to find these opportunities and making different connections. But I would say Italy can be quite challenging. They just don't have as many programs as France or Spain, for example. Okay, Katerina says, if I have EU citizenship, are there more options for me to teach in the EU? And would I be able to make more than break even? If you have EU citizenship, that is amazing. So then all those language schools can hire you, but you may still be required to have a degree, bachelor's degree. And then depending on the country, if you're a non-native speaker, they may also ask for a C2 certificate of your English level. So that would be like the Cambridge proficiency or IELTS, whatever the band is, that is C2 level. So I have a friend in Italy who wants to teach. She said all the schools are asking for that C2 level if you're not a native speaker. And as far as making more than breaking even, get a little bit creative. Like, yes, you can teach in language academies, but also offer private lessons. Also, maybe start working online and teaching. I don't know, you could even sell different teaching materials, things like that online. So there are definitely ways to not break even. But if you're just relying on teaching in a public school or teaching in private language academies, in Europe, typically you are just breaking even, unfortunately. Okay, other questions? Let's see. Okay, so Cheryl says, what do we need to know about the new ETA document that Europe is implementing? I'm not super up on that. I think it's just basically like that you have to have a visa to enter Europe, but you would have to have that anyway. Like that was the, if that was for like tourists. So maybe you didn't need one before, but now you do. But you would have to have your student visa or your work visa or your work holiday. You'd already have to have that sorted. So I don't think it really would affect us too much. Okay, let's see. Khadija says, I'm new to teaching and I'll be finishing my MBA in July. I want to teach abroad and get my TEFL to leave in September. What would you recommend? I was going to enroll in TEFL Academy this month. So it depends on where you want to teach. If you're brand new to teaching and you want to teach in like a more competitive country, then I would actually recommend something like CELTA, CERT TESOL, or International TEFL Academy. If you want to teach in a region that's not as competitive, like Latin America, Africa, maybe Eastern Europe, then something like the TEFL Academy could be enough. It also depends on if you're a native speaker or non-native speaker. So there's a few different things and factors that it would depend on. Okay, any other questions? Feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you're catching up on the replay, again, you can leave any questions that you have and I will get back to them. So if you do need help and maybe you have questions about which TEFL course to get or where you should teach, or you just want some free resources, then you can fill out my survey by going to eslteacher365.com/survey. And it'll just be a little form that you'll fill out with some information. And based on that information, I will send you different resources, links, free guides, all of that kind of stuff. And if you just want to email me directly, you can reach me at jamie@eslteacher365.com. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so I hope that this training was helpful. I hope that you get to teach abroad in 2025, and do not be shy if you need help with your teach abroad journey. I am always here to help you. So have a fantastic 2025, and if you have any requests for future topics for any of these live videos, just leave a comment down below. All right, have a fantastic day.